Shit is getting pretty fucking weird, so I felt like I had to do this video. Are you feeling the Aquarian energy yet? Is it getting weird yet? Because it's getting pretty fucking weird, unless you're living under a rock. Anyways, let's get into it because I want to talk about some things in this video. Basically, we are going to go on a little journey back to the past a little bit and talk about why shit is so fucking crazy right now according to the astrology, okay? Yeah, we're going to go a little bit into the past, a little bit into now, and a little bit into the future. So if that sounds good to you, then hang out with me, chill, stay a while, grab you something to eat, something to drink, and leg out. By the way, if you're new here, my name is Tawny Michelle, and we are not all love, light, twin flames, and unicorns over here, so please keep that in mind. Now, it is my Saturn return right now. You would think I'd be getting like a little bit more mature with my style, but apparently I'm getting younger, so. Okay, so we are in revolutionary times, right? I know if you've been watching my prediction videos, if you've been watching any of the videos I've been putting out over the last few months, then we know, or even last year, even a year ago, ever since I've been doing this channel, I've been talking about the shit that's coming. But we know that we are in revolutionary times. We are going through a massive collective wake the fuck up moment, okay? We are literally getting spanked on our fucking ass. That's what's happening here. So we are going to talk about the shit going on right now with the weather, okay? And what's going on with that astrologically. Also just tons of other shit because the shit in Texas is just insane. And if you are there, I really hope that you are able to stay safe. Really feel for you guys, okay? And I'm going to talk about some of that as well in regards to the astrology and stuff like that on a serious note. But yeah, shit is getting pretty fucking crazy. First, we are going to backtrack. I've been taking notes. We're going to talk about basically what the fuck is going on. Like I've said 1,000 times now, you get the point. Let's travel backwards to January 2020, before the world basically ended, right? In January 2020, we had a big ass fucking transit, okay? Now, this had been building up for months. This transit was the conjunction of Saturn, Big Daddy Saturn, and Pluto. Okay, now here is what the fuck this means, right? Saturn in astrology rules our foundations, our traditions, where we have discipline, rules, authority, basically where you need to color inside of the lines. Confinement, it is kind of like our boundaries, our structures, our foundations that stand for a long time. Saturn is about maturing and dealing with reality, dealing with the hard challenges and lessons of reality. But in a collective sense, it really rules our authority and our structures, buildings, corporations, businesses, systems that are very sturdy, that are kind of stuck in place. Apparently, the world's new big daddy is no longer Saturn and is Bill Gates, Mr. Billy G. And Pluto is basically about destruction, fear, chaos, tearing shit to the ground to recreate it, regeneration. It is about control, power, resourcefulness. These two archetypes meet together in the sign of Capricorn, and Saturn rules Capricorn, so it's very powerful there. Capricorn is the sign on a general collective scale in the bigger sense of big corporations and businesses and government and all of these types of things. So these two planets meet once every around 30 to 36 years. Their transits can be a little wonky. Sometimes it's around 33, sometimes it's around 36, but when these two planets meet, they end up correlating with major historic world events. Other time periods that these planets met was in 1914, which was when World War I started, in 1947 and 1982. Around those times, we saw major economic crises, we saw major dismantling of the current governments and paradigms. These conjunctions correlate with major shifts, and they hadn't met in Capricorn in a very long time. When these two planets meet, we basically see massive fear, panic, destruction of traditions and structures, government control, power, the destruction of certain governments, disease, sickness, pandemics, economic recessions and crises, possible wars, exposing the darkness and unjust situations behind the structures, authority, policies, governments, rules and regulations, laws, etc. This is just the beginning. The conjunction is just the beginning of a cycle, the cycle, right? Towards the end of the cycle, the third quarter square, which will happen, you know, many years from now, a couple decades from now, we will start seeing the ending, basically crazy times in history, okay? And this correlates perfectly with around the time we started hearing about the pandemic, right? Like, right? We get this conjunction in January 2020 and we start hearing about this pandemic, right? That just kind of comes out of nowhere. But, you know, they kind of looked back and said apparently the first case of it was like months before. But like I said, these two were building for months. So we were already starting to feel this energy. Now, not to mention on top of Saturn and Pluto, Jupiter was there joining them in Capricorn. And what does Jupiter do? It makes things big. It expands things. It makes things on a large scale. So Jupiter came and blew that mother effer up. You know what I mean? It was like, no, we're going big. Go big or go home kind of energy. In Capricorn, which on a general scale, like I said, is about the foundations and structures that govern our world, right? The big businesses and corporations and governments and all of that kind of shit. So we see this massive panic, this massive crisis that all aligns with these planetary archetypes. Jupiter can also exaggerate things because it makes things bigger and more inflated than what they would be without Jupiter there, right? And we do end up seeing that as well with the Jupiter-Pluto conjunction that ends up happening not long after this. Another fun fact before we move forward is around this time, Neptune was at 16 degrees Pisces. And guess when the last time Neptune was at 16 degrees Pisces? Can you guess? The Salem fucking witch trials. How insane is that? Just a fun fact, you know, just a fun fact. I feel like we should all be thinking about this right now. This is a big deal. Neptune was at the same freaking degree in Pisces that it was during the Salem witch trials, which was believed to have happened around February 1692. Not to mention Neptune, the planet that literally blurs the lines of reality, so we don't know what's real and what's not. Therefore, Neptune can rule things like scandals, rumors, propaganda, the media, celebrities, Hollywood. It rules anything that can have like a projection where we don't necessarily see the whole thing, so we don't know if it's real or not, what's an illusion, and it also can rule delusion and escapism and all of these things. And so, not to mention on top of that, Pluto was in a sextile with Neptune, and this has been going on and off for a while now, last year, and is still somewhat on and off. It's like moving apart now. And like I said, Pluto rules fear and chaos and control and power. People in power, people that have a lot of wealth, etc. In the same sign of Capricorn, big businesses and leadership and government, etc. Sextiling Neptune, like I said, which blurs the lines of reality, illusion, media, propaganda, scandals, etc. So these two were kind of working together, and then Neptune comes back in the mix in a little bit. So interpret that how you will. And probably one of the most literal and spot on things that happened last year in March, at the end of March 2020, Saturn moved into the sign of Aquarius to get a little sneak peek before it retrograded back and then moved back. Basically, Aquarius is the sign of the people, humanity, technology, the internet, any kind of higher scientific inventions, experiments. Saturn moves into Aquarius. And what is Saturn again? Restriction, right? In the sign of Aquarius, the people, humanity, and then we start seeing lockdowns, right, of the people. And also on top of that, because Aquarius rules things like social media and the internet, because Aquarius is about humanity, but it's also somewhat distant since it's Saturn ruled, and Saturn in Aquarius kind of brings that distance. It's like coming together, but also distant. And social media is the perfect representation of that. You're not actually with the person, but you can still connect with people, right? And so Saturn in Aquarius then also brings social distancing. And then around that time, we started seeing censorship first start really going down and happening and getting pretty big. A lot of conspiracy theorists, which is also very Aquarian-like, start getting censored, banned, and kicked off the internet. So around this time, the node was finishing up in Cancer. The North Node was finishing up in Cancer. What does Cancer deal with? The family, the home life, the roots, where you feel comfortable, secure, safe, and at home. And then we start seeing stay-at-home orders happen as well around this time. Then around May 2020, the whole damn shit shifts, right? Because we have the Jupiter-Pluto conjunction, and this is when things really started taking off with the virus. It started spiking, numbers started spiking, the death toll started going up. At least the numbers back then were. I mean, I don't know. I know there's a lot of confusion around the numbers, but at least, from what they were telling us, it really went with the Jupiter-Pluto conjunctions. On top of that, in May, the North Node finally moved out of Cancer and into the sign of Gemini, and the South Node moved into the sign of Sagittarius. Now, I did make a lot of different predictions about the archetypes and traits and themes that we would start seeing with the North Node in Gemini and South Node in Sagittarius. I will link those down below or show those on the screen where you can go and get more info about that or go back in time and see all that. And it's basically what we are freaking seeing. Gemini and Sagittarius are the signs that deal with information, education, travel, media, because they deal with information and communication, all of those types of things. Now, Sagittarius itself, with the South Node, and the South Node is what is karmically happening, what is decreasing, where our comfort zone is, where we don't want to let go of things that we're holding on to from the past. The South Node's in Sagittarius, and what does Sagittarius deal with? Politics, law, organized and institutional belief systems, dogmas, worldviews, political views, religious views, foreign countries, different cultures, faith. Can also sometimes deal with righteousness, opinions, contradictions, as well as higher education. Now, both of these signs, because they're mutable, have somewhat of a duality and a division with them, okay? So the North Node in Gemini, the North Node is what needs to increase in order for us to decrease the past or let go of the past and to feel more aligned. The North Node basically shows us what we are needing to learn, where we're not comfortable, where we need to learn lessons in this kind of archetype or energy, whatever sign that it's in. And Gemini, the North Node in Gemini, is about facts and logic, speech and communication, information and short bits of information, questioning what you think you know, also considering other sides that are not yours, other facts, other opinions, only looking at the facts and the proof instead of just going off of what you believe, like Sagittarius, listening to opposing opinions and facts, understanding that there are two sides to every situation. Gemini is also about our local environments and our community and neighborhoods. Gemini can also rule things like gossip, media, journalism, independent entrepreneurs or independent platforms or businesses. Are you seeing anything familiar here yet? In case you're not, around this time we started seeing an increase in independent fact checkers or just fact checkers in general. We started seeing an increase in the use of the TikTok platform, which shares short pieces and bits of information. Very Gemini. We start seeing an increased theme in small businesses and talk of small businesses being shut down. We start seeing an increase in independent platforms or media or news sources or journalists. And then with the South Node in Sagittarius, we start seeing a debate between political views, dogmas, belief systems, theme of foreign countries, their cultures, political and religious views, and even just belief systems or dogmas in general from the past that need to be let go of. And basically no one can agree to disagree. Sagittarius is kind of like the debater. That's like, I believe what I believe and I'm gonna fight for what I believe in because it's a fire sign. I'm going to put it into action and I'm going to, just constantly and this is kind of, I'm not saying Sagittarians themselves are like this. I'm just saying on a collective scale, these are the themes that we're seeing amplified. And a lot of it is somewhat of the other side of these energies. You could say the more lower vibrational sides and new age terms, even though I don't really like to call it that because each sign kind of has its own higher traits and lower traits, and we're seeing a lot of the lower traits of these signs right now. And we kind of were seeing the same thing with the Cancer and Capricorn nodal axis when that was happening for that cycle. But towards the end, it was kind of like, all right, nobody's really getting back to their roots or finding some kind of comfort within. So the universe was like, we're going to force their asses to sit at home with their families and freaking do that, you know? So, and I'm kind of thinking that's what's going to happen here, but it does somewhat excite me because my TikTok For You page, I have been seeing a lot more people starting to talk about unity and coming together rather than being so divided, which is really fucking awesome. So hopefully that happens. But basically, the Gemini and Sag nodal axis is going to be there until early 2022. And while we're on the topic of 2022 real quick before we move on and go back to the past, the Pluto return, the United States Pluto return, is going to happen around February 2022 as well, which I think is so interesting. And this is, I think, going to be a massive deal. And we're in the build up to this right now, where I think the US is getting completely restructured. The destruction of the old way of doing things is definitely happening with that Plutonian energy in Capricorn, and basically going to have, the US is basically going to have its Pluto return, which basically means Pluto is returning to the same spot when the US what became its own nation, which was in July, which was July 4th, 1776. At least that's the chart that I use, which was 245 years ago. The US's Pluto is at 27 degrees Capricorn. So Pluto in the sky right now is getting very close to there and will end up there in February 2022. This is a fucking crazy time to be alive. Like, even just talking about this, I'm like, I can't even believe like I'm alive to see this right now. So like, get hyped up, man. I know it's fucking crazy and it's not always cute and it's definitely not always something to be necessarily happy about, but I think that we are definitely in some massive historical times where so many transformations are happening, and especially in this decade, but altogether in this next, like, I would say 100 years, this next century, it is going to be absolutely the world, and and the US is going to look so much different, in my opinion, by the time that all of this is done. I think it needs it. I think honestly we are going through a massive purge right now. So then around November 2020, we start seeing Neptune coming into a square with the North Node in Gemini and the South Node in Sagittarius. Now, this was insane. This is when things started getting very, very unclear. I mean, the square kind of already started happening a little bit before this. It was definitely building. So we have the nodes in the signs of education, information, communication, media, facts, all of these things squaring Neptune, which blurs the boundaries of reality. So what's real and what's fake. And so this is just completely being weaved into the information, the media, just stories. Sagittarius and Gemini deal with stories as well. The facts, nothing is 100% certain or clear around this time, and there's a lot of delusion and illusion going around, and this actually just started coming out from its square in this month in February 2021, which I think is pretty interesting. But we've been in this since it really started taking effect in September 2020. So basically with this aspect, you can see propaganda, false narratives, scandals, delusion, uncertainty, gossip, things that aren't true. Now, Neptune was also sextiling Pluto, which, like I said before, Pluto, fear, control, power being amplified through Neptune, narratives and delusion and media. And this is what we had going on during the election, along with a Mercury retrograde in Scorpio and Libra, because it ended up ingressing back into Libra. And a Mercury retrograde during an election is like, holy shit, because Mercury deals with written and verbal communication, the mail, all of these different things that would be included in voting. And so that Mercury retrograde, it puts things all out of whack, delays, setbacks, accusations of fraud, confusion, what's real, what's not. It doesn't matter. I don't care where you're at on if if the election was fraud or not. That's not what I'm here to debate. I'm just saying that the reason those themes came up, the reason that this election was so insane, is because of those transits that we were having, which definitely correlate with the talk and the accusations and the scandals and the, all of these different things. And I was saying ahead of time time as well. Like, this election is going to be insane. It is not going to go down like a normal election. Yeah, believe what you want. I'm just drawing the comparisons with the astrology. I'm not necessarily trying to push a narrative here. I may go into a little bit of what I believe later on that is going to happen with all of this stuff. But other than that, I'm not, you know, I don't care what side of the coin you're on. If you're on a side, just chill out. So then the next big event basically was the Saturn-Jupiter conjunction that happened December 20th, 2020. And I did tons of content on that. I have a whole long, detailed, in-depth video going into the Great Conjunction, plus the next like decade, 20 years, 200 years, themes that we're going to see and predictions that we're likely going to see. So go check that out if you haven't. I also went into it more in my January plus 2021 themes video. So go check that out if you haven't seen that. But to just kind of name the basics here, Jupiter and Saturn moved into the sign of Aquarius and came into an exact conjunction. This is a 20-year cycle, but this conjunction was special and rare because this conjunction starts a new 200-year cycle of Saturn and Jupiter meeting in air signs, which starts an era of air. These are called eras or even new ages. Now, they are not necessarily the same. It's not the same thing as like what you hear about the age of Aquarius or the golden age or anything like that. This is just the great conjunction of Saturn and Jupiter, but they are said to start massive new eras, new world orders, new way of progressing and growing, how we progress forward as humanity, which is also very aligned with Aquarian energy as well, as Aquarius deals with the progression of humanity and the people, and also science, technology, experiments. But other things that we could see that we are already starting to see some of with this conjunction is the expansion of technology, the expansion of limitations with technology or with humanity, the expansion of technocracy, monopolies, globalism. All of these themes kind of correlate with the archetype of Aquarius and the Saturn and Jupiter conjunction in Aquarius. But also at the same time, and this is not to scare you, just at the same time, Aquarius is supposed to be about the people, not the leaders. And the leaders are still trying to do what they did the last 200 years with the people and be on top of the people, and the people be down here. And so basically they're trying to progress this new world order or these new ways of doing things and kind of almost controlling the people in certain ways, you could say. I mean, depending on how you look at it, I guess. So it's kind of like a battle of the old versus the new. But the problem is the new is trying to be built by the people in power instead of the people. And so we're still going to see some of this because, you know, this conjunction doesn't happen and it's like, boom, any of these things I've named off. It's not like it happens and then boom, there's a change right then and there. Like, no, it takes time. We've been doing the same thing and living in the same way and the same structure and the same kind of society and systems and governments for so long. So it's going to take time for things to progress, for things to change, for the people to finally realize their power and say, okay, I've had enough of this. I don't want to live in this kind of system anymore, which is what this next thing, Uranus square Saturn, is all about this year, I think personally. So basically, we're still trying to progress with the old mindset or the old system, and that's not working. And that's what I think this Pluto return for the US is really going to start dismantling and disrupting and kind of destructing. You know, I think it's going to start crumbling eventually. Saturn square Uranus is kind of asking us what's really changing. You know, what's really changing? Are we actually changing? Are we just progressing with the old ass shit that we've been carrying this whole time? It's also very much with Saturn and Aquarius, square Uranus and Taurus, very much about the natural versus the unnatural. Right? I've been seeing themes of this come up, right? You know, this Uranus and Taurus energy is very eccentric. It deals with our food supply, which we've been seeing, which I said we would see, with our farmers, our industry, how we gather our resources. We're going to have to get innovative with these things. These things are shifting and changing and progressing, and so we have to get innovative. But there's also Saturn squaring it in Aquarius, saying no. You know, with Saturn kind of being the authority, and with Pluto kind of playing out Saturn as well, since it's in Saturn's other home sign of Capricorn, the power and the wealth and all of that and the control, it's still trying to control. So Uranus and Taurus squaring this, you know, Saturn is kind of shutting down any disruptions from Uranus or disruptions from people that want to live differently than the way that everybody else is or that everybody else has been for so long. So basically, what we're seeing, Uranus can rule things like independence, emancipation, liberation, freedom. It's also very progressive and scientific in ways, but it's also about, this square is also about emancipation, freedom, independence, liberation from oppressive systems or from even governments, and we're seeing a lot of eccentricity and a lot of people starting to feel drawn to go back to old ways, which is very Taurian, to grow their own food, to have their own land, to live more simply instead of so complex and have all these things. And this has a lot to do with why we are seeing everything happening with this weather, with these crazy weather conditions. Now, I know there's debates about this. Is it global warming? Is it this HHRP program? Like, what is it? And I get it, but I can't really answer that. I don't think anybody truly 100% knows, right? With this Gemini and Sagittarius nodal axis, but I'm wary about any kind of so-called threats that I hear, especially after 2020. I'm weary of anything that mass people are trying to get me to be afraid of, right? Or mass people are trying to tell me to do, and not even just mass people in power, right? I think that it's became abundantly clear, at least to me, but it's became pretty clear to me personally that there's still a lot of people that are just trying to do things out of the old mindset of I want to capitalize off things, consumerism and money and greed and all of these types of things. And so, yeah, I'm just weary to trust anything that I hear. I do my own research. I fact check myself. I don't let somebody else do it for me. I don't just take someone's word for it. And this is what the North Node in Gemini is trying to teach us, to consider other sides, to listen to other people's opinions and what they have to say, and not just completely disregard because you have a different belief, but to actually look for facts instead of go just based off of what you believe, without any kind of evidence, proof, etc. So, and from what I've researched and gathered and the facts that I have seen, and we can't even be sure if we're seeing facts either, you know what I mean? So that's kind of the hard part with this, but I've came to conclusions that are not certain, but that I am willing to change if necessary, but I have came to conclusions that everything's kind of up in the air, and I'm not going to just easily believe or trust in something. So that's just me personally and how I've been dealing with things. So anyways, and here are some other ways that we can see this Uranus square playing out. I did do a whole video on this too, so go check that out if you haven't seen that already. I just did that earlier this week, and I went into a lot of depth about Saturn and Uranus, but here's some other things I've put together recently. So Saturn square Uranus liberates us in the form of pressure, loss, restrictions, rules, decrease, separation from old systems, structures, rules, and foundations. But this can also come in the form of shock at times. Uranus can be quite shocking at times because it can really feel like, things that we've worked for or things that have worked for us or things that we've relied on or depended on for so long can start becoming very restrictive, oppressive, or they can start falling, crumbling, fading, going away in some way, or just not supplying us with what we need. We can start feeling like we're just hitting our heads against a brick wall, and the brick wall isn't answering anymore. The brick wall isn't helping us, isn't protecting us anymore. Instead, it's limiting us now. In some way, somehow, humanity is collectively getting stripped down to the bare essentials. Now, this doesn't have to necessarily be physically. I'm not saying you're gonna, lose everything or anything like that, but in some area of our life and also just on a collective scale, we are all taking hits in different ways. We are all being restricted or held back or delayed in different ways. We are all making sacrifices, or, things are decreasing in some area of our life, or things are not working or moving forward like we would want in some area of our life. In some way. In a way, when these things happen, they actually can also be liberating us and giving us a freedom from the oppressive, dense, or restrictive system we had relied on and thought we needed for so long. So hopefully that makes sense so far. But because we get stripped of it, we then no longer have to worry about it being taken in a way. But in the same breath, then we must get innovative and find ways to do what we need to do within these new conditions that can be limiting or that can feel like confinements or restrictions. Or a lack of what we had before that we had relied on for so long. And this is basically what's happening in Texas. And I think this is the start of people starting this kind of emancipation process or this kind of individuality, independence, liberation from old systems and structures process of relying on certain systems and structures that are in place for so long that are becoming actually restrictive and oppressive now and not giving us the freedoms that we want, need, or thought that we had. And this is another way that this Uranus square can play out, finding freedom in the limits, in the restrictions, in the delays, in the brick walls, in the no's, and the conditions that we end up having to deal with in some way, shape, or form in our lives, personally and collectively. So over the next few years, we're going to probably see a lot of people finding innovative ways to not rely on these systems that basically govern society as much anymore. I think that we will start seeing the systems or the governments or the structures or whatever in place try to prevent this from happening and try to stop this in some way. Because like I've said before, Saturn kind of is the dominant one in this square with Uranus because Saturn rules Aquarius, amongst other things. And so Saturn is kind of the one here that's constantly like, no. And this really plays out just even looking at the events that have transpired in the last few months, like any kind of disruption, rebellion, like especially like with the stock market, for example, that's a very good example. We kind of see this kind of uprising, this kind of movement, which is very Uranus, that's rebelling against the system. You know, the way that the system has always been ran, you know, there's this excitement for change and like, oh my God, like the little guy is going to take over the big guy, you know, the little guy is going to beat the big guy. We're going to somehow, you know, beat the rich, et cetera, at their own game. Well, nothing really changed, did it? Yeah, you know, some of the little guys got to make a bunch of money, but the rich are still the rich. And basically it's just stomped out, and now GameStop, at least at this time, is back to decreasing. So what really changed, right? And this is the kind of energy we're going to see. We're going to see little uprisings or little disruptions or backlashes, and it's going to build and build and build, but Saturn's just going to kind of like, nope, nope, nope. And it's just going to kind of go back to normal and settle down. And then, you know, something else is going to happen, and then that's going to get stomped out. And that's basically what's happening with this until I think people finally see, okay, yeah, like nothing's changing. And, you know, and then things start uprising, I think, as the square starts decreasing. Basically, with this square on a personal scale and even whatever happens collectively as well, I think sometimes that the hardships and the challenges at times can bring some sort of weird, unexpected liberation and freedom that we wouldn't have known that we actually needed without those hardships and challenges and hard conditions. Without them, we wouldn't have known that freedom, you know? And so this is basically Saturn Uranus, some kind of freedom that comes in a way that seems hard or seems like you're in some kind of hard conditions or hardship or challenge, or like you're being restricted or squeezed or pushed, or like, you know, through tension or rules or separation, loss, etc. You know, Saturn rules kind of all those things, distance, you know, and in some way, somehow, there can also be a weird kind of freedom that comes with that. So it's kind of like, let's say that you have a bank robbing problem and you're just constantly robbing banks and you can't stop and you're miserable, and you finally get caught and you get taken to jail and you're like, oh my God, this sucks. This is like really bad. Like, I hate this, you know, like I never wanted to be caught, this, that, and the other. But then you get there, and after you kind of like settle down and you kind of accept and you kind of like face reality that, okay, like I'm here, you actually get this sigh of relief because you no longer are haunted by this like you know, impulse to constantly rob banks, you know, and now you can just kind of chill and rest and just like surrender and like, you know, whatever. And so that's kind of what I'm talking about, you know, and I'm not like, that's just an example, like a random example that came to my mind. But through these restrictive conditions, we can somehow use them to find a way to see what we're actually gaining or find the freedom or the liberation in the situation, instead of looking and only focusing on how hard it is or how restrictive it is or how burdensome it is or how much it's like imposing on our lives in some way. Yeah, that's like ways that we're going to see Saturn, Uranus really playing out, I think, this year. But like I said, this is basically what's happening in Texas right now, and I've been seeing a lot of people in Texas saying like, this has really shown me like that I cannot rely on these systems. Like, I've already been knowing that I need to, you know, have like try to start you know, having my own resources and being able to rely on myself. I just didn't think it was going to like happen this quick, and, you know, blah, blah, blah. And so it's really pushing people to start really considering how to take care of themselves and not have to rely on certain systems to do it. Also, Uranus rules weather. I also kind of think of Aquarius, the sign of Aquarius, as weather as well. Also, Uranus rules like random conditions, and I think I said in my last video, we would likely see shakeups, earthquakes, natural disasters, and we're probably going to see a lot more really weird weather conditions as well with this energy, because those are themes that these energies bring. And we're also going to see a lot of disruption to structures that maybe have been around for a long time, or systems that have maybe been around a long time. So anyways, hopefully you guys got something from this, or you found this entertaining. Definitely let me know if you're still here and you watched it all the way through, because if you did, you are a badass motherfucker. Comment down below and let me know any kinds of videos that you would like to see from me next. I am going to be working on the March videos this upcoming week. Hopefully I can get those out early. Follow me on Insta if you don't already, and also follow me on my other social medias if you'd like to keep up with me. I make tons of predictions over there. I post daily on Instagram, and you know, talk about tons of stuff going on. I'm a little bit less filtered over on Instagram, so if you're triggered really easily about a lot that's going on right now, then maybe don't follow me on Instagram, because I kind of don't hold back a lot on Instagram with sharing things and sharing different opinions and looking at different sides of things that I don't see other people looking at. So also, my 2021 predictions for each sign is coming. I know it's late, but it'll probably be out within the next few days. So please do me a favor, when you see that video pop up in your notifications, please like it, share it, comment on it, because that video has been a lot of fucking work, but I would really, really appreciate it if you help that video out when it comes out, but it is coming. Anyways, but I love you guys. Hopefully this was helpful or entertaining for you in some way, or insightful for you in some way, and I will see you guys in my other videos. Bye.